intermediate the invitation for Ron. And I don't know if Paola told you something about Unicinos, but now we are colleagues. We are sharing some research agendas, and we are in south of Brazil. And in the close future, we hope to receive you here at Unicinos, and maybe we can organize something with Federal University, Paulo, and so let's think about this in the future. So
absolutely. I think there will be opportunities because I'm also linked to Campinas. And I'm working together with postdocs over there. So as soon as I can travel to Brazil, I will. And so then maybe we can make a combination, right? So
really nice
multi-purpose trip.
Really nice. So welcome for our colleagues from Unicinos and all of our partners from other universities in Brazil. We are very happy and honored to receive you here, Ron. Most of us have read your insights about proximity and also geography of innovation. And so it's a big pleasure to receive you in a meeting of our research group. So I believe that it's not necessary to introduce Ron, but let me say some words about his trajectory. Ron is a full professor of economics geography of the Department of Human Geography and Spatial Planning at the Faculty of Geosciences at Utrecht University. Professor of Innovation Studies at the Stavanger Center for Innovation Research, the University of Stavanger. So we have, EcoHubi have 2 research projects with this center. And we are working with Elisa, Marta, Bjorn, Tatiana. Also, so we are very close. Ron is a board member of the International Regional Studies Association, and also member of the National Advisory Group to the Minister of Education, Culture and Science. He holds a PhD in economics from Tinbergen Institute and received an honorary doctorate in the natural science from Marburg University in Germany. Boschma's main research interests are evolutionary economic geography, spatial evolution of industry, geography of innovation, proximity and relatedness, also structure and evolution of spatial networks, agglomeration externalities and regional growth, and regional diversification. So I think, good morning, Ron. Once again, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to this conversation. We are convinced since now that will be a great morning for us and a great afternoon, I hope, for you too. Ron, the floor is yours. Over to you now.
Okay, thanks very much and for this very kind introduction. I'm really honored to be invited, and as I said, we have already big plans to make me come over to your wonderful place. I would really love to, and I hope that can happen soon. And that we, of course, that would also mean that we get rid of this Corona crisis, which we are all fed up with. All right. Okay, I will let me share my PowerPoint. Now let me see. Always when I can't find. Ah, yeah, the share is there. Okay. Just loading. I think it's a lot of MB, so it takes a bit.
Hi, Jana. Good morning. Nice to see you here. Ron, Janaína is professor of our economics program here at Unicinos too.
Yeah, we met. So it's really nice to see her. Yes. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
It's full screen?
Yes, full screen.
Okay, very good. So, okay, I get a bit weird. Okay, my slides, I just maybe try to see whether I can make it a bit bigger so that I can read my own slides. Let me see. Maybe I have to click on it. No. It's this is when you come back from holidays, you have forgotten everything about how things are working. So that also means that I had great holidays, right? So I really cleaned my head. And okay. No, okay, I can read it. Just put the laptop a bit closer so that I. All right. Thanks very much. I'll try to limit the presentation to about 4, which is I think 10 o'clock for you, or 11 o'clock. Yes.
10 o'clock. 10 o'clock.
Yeah. Right. My presentation will be on what I have referred to as the dark side of the geography of innovation. Which I think is a very interesting topic because most of my life I've been working on the geography of innovation and try always to think about the positive things about innovation, right? So how can we enhance it? What are the bottlenecks? What are the barriers to overcome in order to make regions innovate? But there is also a dark side to it, right? So an inequality comes to mind in the first place. And there has been quite some research on it, right? Where we know that if we look at the geography of innovation, that technologies and innovation tend to concentrate in particular places, and that might even contribute to widening regional disparities across regions. So in that sense, there might be also a dark side to the geography of innovation. Some regions are very good at it. They tend to be well endowed with all kinds of favorable factors that make those regions innovate. While there are many regions to try to catch up, or they lag behind and not able to move on. So in that perspective, you might say there's also a dark side to the geography of innovation. Can you see my second slide? Yes, I think so, right? Okay, good. As I said, there's a tendency of innovations to concentrate in space and to contribute to regional inequality, right? And this is the topic that I would like to focus on during this presentation. This is of course not new. The geography of innovation literature is quite old already. It already exists for a number of decades. So it's not new what I'm saying, but what I try to do is to look at it from a kind of more recent perspective, which focus on the notions of relatedness and complexity that I've been working on myself already for some time. So in that sense, it might provide a novel contribution to this debate, to what extent innovations tend to widen regional disparities. So what I will mainly focus on is an empirical study on 274 NUTS2 regions, and I want to find out what type of diversification opportunities do those regions have, right? Because diversification means regions develop new economic activities, which will bring new growth, new jobs to the region, and which regions are more capable of doing that. And even more important, which regions are more capable of diversifying into what I will refer to as more complex technologies and industries, because they are more likely to bring high economic benefits to the region. If it's the case that only, let's say, high-income regions are capable of doing that, but low-income regions do not have that capability, then it might contribute to widening regional disparities, right? And it will be hard for peripheral regions or low-income regions to overcome those barriers. But let's first look at the data, what we observe, and if we can indeed identify that the potential of regions to diversify into more complex technologies and more complex industries is uneven across regions. This means that first, I just have to introduce a bit, but you might already be familiar with, but I just introduce it a bit, the whole literature on how regions do diversify over time. We know that regions differ in their capacity to diversify into new economic activities, right? We have the case of Detroit, right, which is a typical case in the US, very highly specialized in car manufacturing. It still is specialized in that particular activity nowadays. The problem of Detroit is not so much that it is specialized in car making, and that maybe also the car making industry is a bit going into the decline. But the major problem of Detroit is that it has a weak capability to diversify into new economic activities. So it has shown no capacity to move into new economic activities that might compensate for the decline of car manufacturing in Detroit. And that's one of the reasons why this city has gone into economic decline. And this is just a slide, a pic that I got from the internet that is showing the downtown Detroit. In the back you can see the headquarters of General Motors, but of course a downtown like that doesn't look very great, which of course shows very much how bad the economic and social problems in a city like Detroit are. This is very much in contrast to a region like Silicon Valley that we all know, right? I don't have to explain that. So, and Silicon Valley has been capable of diversifying into new technologies over and over again, over a very long period of time. Now, of course, more recently in social media, Facebook, Google, all located in that particular area. And it seems that Silicon Valley is still doing very well in that respect, contributing to new technological revolutions again and again. There's already some discussion going on if Silicon Valley is already losing out a bit in that respect, but that's an interesting discussion, right? And we will only see in the long term whether it will lose this strong ability to diversify. But for now, everything seems to work well in terms of its innovative capacity. So going back, so regions differ in their capacity to diversify, and I've shown that with the striking a contrast between the Detroit area and Silicon Valley. Then this begs the question: what makes those regions diversify? And we know from many studies that I've been doing myself, but many other colleagues, we have shown that local capabilities conditions which new economic activities will be feasible to develop in a region. So you just cannot just diversify in any direction, but the type of capabilities that you have established in the past provide opportunities, but they set also limits to what can be achieved in this regional diversification process. So regions follow certain trajectories, and it's not easy to make radical departures from those trajectories, because the local capabilities do not allow regions to do that very easily. So that makes that regions are more likely to diversify into new activities that are related to existing activities in regions. So they exploit the relevant capabilities that are present in the region. That might be knowledge, it might be skills, it might be institutions on which those new activities can draw. And just let me, and this has been dubbed as related diversification, which is in contrast to unrelated diversification, right? So just to provide a fictitious example, in region A, you have a region that is specialized in motorbikes, then moves into car making, and then diversifies into car trucks. And you can imagine each time this region is diversifying, it builds on relevant engineering capabilities. And this is a typical case of related diversification. So each time you diversify, you don't have to transform completely the underlying capabilities that you need in order to diversify. But the capabilities that are used in motorcycles can still be used in producing a new car industry. And the capabilities that you need to excel in car making can be used by moving into car trucks, right? And that's why this has been referred to as related diversification. Unrelated diversification is a very different story. Yeah? This is region B that is specialized in textiles, then moves into aircraft making, and then diversifies into pharmaceuticals. And as you can imagine, each time this region is diversifying, it has to transform completely its local capabilities because the existing capabilities are of no relevance whatsoever to move into these new economic activities. So the capabilities that you use in textiles are of no relevance to move into aircraft making. And when you want to go from aircraft making to pharmaceuticals, capabilities in aircraft making are hardly of any relevance to move into pharmaceuticals. So that's why this type of diversification has been dubbed as unrelated diversification. So it's unrelated to the type of capabilities that were already present in the region. So that is one aspect of the diversification process. You diversify in related or unrelated diversification. And what the empirical studies tend to show is that related diversification is the rule, right? Because it is easier for regions to move into new economic activities that are related to existing economic activities. While unrelated diversification is much harder to do, and that's why you observe it now and then, but it is quite exceptional, right? And there's a good theory on proximity and relatedness that can explain that. Okay, that's one part of the diversification process. Is it related or not to existing capabilities? The other dimension that I will look into is complexity. But because it's not just about diversifying into new economic activities and whether it's related or unrelated to existing capabilities, but you also need to have a capacity to diversify into more complex activities. And complex activities are often considered complex when being unique and relying on a wide range of capabilities, right? So, for example, artificial intelligence is a very complex technology because you need to excel in many different capabilities, and you also have to have a strong capacity to coordinate and bring together all those capabilities in order to move into artificial intelligence. And that's why this technology is very complex. Well, there might be also very simple technologies or industries that you could think of. For example, I always make here in the Netherlands the example of pig production, right? Just to produce pigs, which is not that hard to do. Okay, you need some knowledge in order to do it, but you can learn that quite easily because you don't need a wide range of capabilities in order to produce pigs. And you're not the only one that can do that. That's why you find pig production in almost every country worldwide, because it is a technology and an industry, and the capabilities that are needed to excel in that are very simple and can be easily copied and imitated by others. This is exactly the type of definition of complexity that have been introduced by Hidalgo and Hausman in a 2009 publication. I'm sure you have heard about it and know a bit about it. So this is just how they have introduced this notion of economic complexity. And this is important because the higher the complexity of a new economic activity, the harder it is to copy by other regions, and therefore the higher the economic benefits for a region. So if you are one of the few regions worldwide that can master a very complex technology, it means you can really benefit from that, economically speaking, because you hardly have any competitors, and therefore you can bring high economic rents. This is the typical case of Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley is not just capable of diversifying in new technologies all the time, but also in technologies that nobody's able to master. And that's why you have Google, which has an enormous market power. Companies like Google the same, because their information externalities on which those firms are built. And therefore it's hard to outcompete them once they dominate the market. Very complex, very difficult to copy. I've just been working on a paper with David Rigby and Pierre-Alex Ballan, in which we actually looked at to European regions and whether they have been in what type of diversification process they developed over a period of 35-40 years. I think the data were from 1970 till 1918, so well, covering almost a period of 45 years. And what we found is that the regions that indeed are diversifying in related activities, but also diversify in more complex activities at the same time, they show the highest GRP growth and employment growth. So just to provide evidence that indeed, if you have a strong ability to move into more complex activities, you will also accrue high economic benefits as a result. Well, you can then use this type of reasoning by looking at what are the diversification opportunities of regions. Here I just have the example of Ile-de-France, and relatedness is on the x-axis and complexity is on the y-axis. And here I just presented all occupations in which Ile-de-France has the Paris region in France, Ile-de-France region, to what extent it has diversification opportunities in occupations, depending on the score of relatedness and depending on the score of the complexity of those occupations. And as you can see, there's a positive relationship between the two, meaning that Ile-de-France has a strong opportunity to diversify into more complex occupations because the relatedness is high for those occupations that are also highly complex. Well, it has very low potential to move into simple occupations because the degree of relatedness is very low. So Ile-de-France, and that's why Ile-de-France is one of the richest regions in Europe, because it has this very strong capability to move into very complex occupations, and it can build on local capabilities to do so. And those occupations are the most complex ones, so you can also accrue highest economic benefits from it. And that's why Ile-de-France region is rich. Here we have a contrasting case. This is an old industrial region in Silesia and Poland. Old industrial region, old coal mining region. Also a lot of related activities were concentrated there, like steel making, etc. And here you can see there is a negative relationship between the two indicators. So saying that the diversification opportunities of Silesia are very different from Ile-de-France. It has higher potential to move into low complex occupations instead of high complex occupations because the relationship is negative. So it has very low potential to move in complex occupations as shown by the low degree of relatedness on the x-axis. So it matters what type of capabilities you develop because it provides opportunities to move into more complex activities or not. In Ile-de-France region, Ile-de-France has a strong capability to move into complex occupations in this respect, while in the Silesia region, it's the opposite. It has more potential to move into very simple occupations, but that might also have lower economic effects on the region. Here's also, okay, I'll skip this just for the sake of time. So this is a literature that we have developed and explored, and we have done a lot of work for the European Commission in this respect. Indeed, the data that I just showed were projects that I did for the European Commission. And we also wanted to know to what extent also interregional linkages might matter in that respect. Because not only regional capabilities might be important, but also interregional linkages, right? So, of course, the study so far, I've just concentrated on the type of capabilities that are present in the region, and they seem to be very important, right? Because again, they provide opportunities, but they set also limits to what regions can achieve when diversifying. But it's not only about regional capabilities. Also, there are trade linkages with other regions. There are research collaborations going on. There's labor mobility going on across regions. So regions are connected to each other. So it might also be the case that that by connecting to other regions, you might get access to capabilities that are missing in your own region, but you can still get access to them. You can still exploit them through those interregional linkages and then diversify into new economic activities. So this is a big question, which we just have included in a new empirical paper. I won't say too much on that because it is not really the main focus of my talk, but just to make it clear, what we did in that paper is that our main thesis that we developed there is that it is not just about connecting to other regions, but it's the type of the interregional linkages that you make to other regions. Because if you connect to another region, yes, you might get access to capabilities that you don't have yourself, but of course you need absorptive capacity to understand the external knowledge in order to learn from the interregional linkage. So it will only bring benefit to your region when you can understand and exploit the knowledge that will flow to your regions through those interregional linkages. And we provided pretty strong evidence for that when looking at all kinds of European regions. It's just been published in regional studies. I just put the reference here. And what we found basically that interregional linkages giving access to additional capabilities in other regions that are complementary to existing capabilities of regions have a stronger impact on regional diversification. So making connection, that's what you often hear. You just have to connect to other regions to expose yourself to external knowledge. That even has a negative effect on regional diversification because to build linkages will be accompanied by costs. Is not just and when they are useless because you don't understand the knowledge that will flow through those linkages, you will only have the cost but not the benefits. And that's why we didn't find an effect. We even found a negative effect while just being exposed to other regions. But if you expose to the right regions that can bring you access to the capabilities that you are missing yourself, but that you can still understand because they are related to your own capabilities, then you can benefit from those interregional linkages, and it will enhance your ability to diversify into new economic activities. And this, of course, this is what the European Commission loves, because then you can make all kinds of maps. Here I just had an example, but we did that here we looked at technologies, for example, here. Okay. Let's assume that Ile-de-France region, that is the region that I colored dark here, wants to develop new hydrogen technologies, right? Because they want to go into green technologies, and now they say, okay, we go for new hydrogen technologies. Well, then first what we do is, do they have the capabilities to do so? Are there any capabilities, relevant capabilities already present in the Ile-de-France region in order to make that happen? Then we find that yes, they have some capabilities, but there are also capabilities missing in the Ile-de-France region. So if they really want to develop this new hydrogen technology, they have to look to the outside. And here we have a map in which we all, and the more colored the region is, the more another region can mean something to the Ile-France region, because they have capabilities that are missing in the Ile-France regions, but that are needed to develop new hydrogen technologies, and that are related to the capabilities that are present in the Ile-de-France region. So this can be very informative, because if Ile-de-France want to develop these now new hydrogen technologies in their smart specialization policy, they might look for partners outside, and then we can, with those type of maps, we can already show them where they might tap into capabilities that might be highly relevant to move into those new hydrogen technologies. So regions do not have their the whole range of capabilities that they need, so they sometimes have to connect to others, and we can, I think, quite precisely assess where those type of missing capabilities can be found. And you can then develop a smart specialization policy in order to make connections to those regions. Okay, I already said something about the France region, which has a very strong capability to diversify into more complex technologies or occupations, right? Silesia region with old industrial region, it had a lesser capability to do so. So still there is an open question: is related diversification more likely to happen in high or low income regions, and more likely to contribute to widening or decreasing income disparities across regions? And is diversification in more complex activities more likely to happen in high or low income regions, and more likely to contribute to higher or lower income disparities across regions? This is a big question as far as I know, we are the first paper that takes on this particular topic. Okay. What did we do? We did a study on European regions. We examined two large data sets, both on patents and industries, to determine which European regions are close to developing more complex or more simple activities. We used two data sets because first we wanted to work with patent data, but of course to use patent data has drawbacks, but also, and this is particularly relevant for our particular topic, is that by using patent data, we study the ability of regions to develop new technologies. But however, patent data might bias the results towards high income regions, as patent activity in low income regions is generally lower, or very low, or even non-existent. So therefore, we also use industry data because there is no bias towards high income regions, right? Industries are more evenly distributed across regions. So by also taking on board industry data, we have a stronger case to build on. And then we run the same type of analysis for industries as for technologies. And then we see whether the findings will also hold for regional diversification in new industries. So that's why we took both data sets. For patents, we used the OECD RegPat dataset. We distinguished in this case 36 two-digit technology classes, and we had data available on 190 European NUTS2 regions, which includes EU27, the UK, and the 4 EFTA countries. So for 32 countries in total. So we only included those regions that had at least some minimum level of patent activity in order to make sure that, because we will also calculate specializations in certain technologies. And then, of course, you don't want that when a region has very low absolute number of patents, then it can still have a specialization in that particular technology because it is not patenting at all in other technologies, right? So that's why you skip those regions from your data set. Then for the industry data, we use the structural business statistics on employment in industries. We could distinguish between 65 two-digit industries, and we had data on 283 European NUTS2 regions. So that's the EU27, the UK, and 4 EFTA countries. Again, the same 32 countries that I talked about before when introducing the patent dataset. Okay, then a big question is how to measure the complexity of activities. Well, there can be a huge debate. There is a huge debate on that. What I did with my co-authors is just take the simple method of reflection introduced by Hidalgo and Hausmann in 2009, in which they refer to 2 dimensions to measure the complexity of a technology or an industry. First of all, what they did is, as I explained before when introducing the complexity dimension, first of all, they look at the diversity of activities present in a region. And the second dimension is how many regions produce the activity in which they have a comparative advantage, right? So this has been referred to as ubiquity. So when a region is specialized in a technology, and the region has also a wide diversity of other activities in that region in which it is specialized, it will score higher on this complexity measure. But also when this region is only one of the few that is capable of producing that technology and has developed a comparative advantage in that. So what it actually is doing is, this complexity measure, is that it captures the idea that many regions are able to master and produce simple technologies and industries, but only a few regions are capable to develop complex technologies and complex industries, because they require capabilities in a large range of activities, right, that need to be combined and to be brought together. And that's why they have measured it as such. Okay, there's a lot to say on that. Maybe you want to come back to that in the discussion, but also for the sake of time, let's move on. So here I just have the 2 top 5 and bottom 5 activities by complexity. For on the left side for technologies, on the right side on industries. As you can see, for technologies, the most complex technology in our case is the telecommunication. Well, okay, this is what is expected, right? Interestingly, of course, in industries, we also have services industries, right? And so post-patent data is also very much focused on manufacturing industries, right? Well, if you include all industries, you also account for services industries. And that did not come even to a surprise to me. The motion picture is the most complex industries, and I can completely understand that, because you can, as you can imagine, to produce a film, you need to bring together a lot of capabilities, bring a lot of specialists together that each have their own capabilities. And to produce a film, you need to bring a wide range of capabilities and combine those in this new product, which is a film in this case. So it makes absolutely sense to me. Head offices management, also very complex activity, as you can imagine. You need to have very specialized people with very specific capabilities that are all working in a head office to run a big organization, and therefore it scores high on us on our air transport. The same, right? It's a very complex activity, because you can imagine to participate in air transport, you need to bring a lot of capabilities together before you can actually participate in that particular industry. Computer programming. Okay, so this I think this worked pretty well, measuring this using this method of reflection and using this and showing the results of the most complex and least complex technologies and industries. Okay, then of course that's what the European Commission like, right? They all want to see top 5s, and so we did that for regions, so for technologies, for industries. I just want to go a bit quicker, because I see that take a bit of thought. It took a bit more time than I anticipated. Okay, so let's go to how we measure relatedness, because that after complexity, relatedness is the other main concept that I talked about before. So how did we measure that? So to what extent do activities, in this case technology and industries, share similar capabilities? Okay, that's an easy question, but then of course you have to measure that. Well, here we used again Very simple method by Hidalgo et al. Introduced in the 2007 science paper, where they used the normalized spatial co-occurrence technique, right? So actually what they're doing is that they look at whether two technologies pop up as specializations in regions, and if that combination is often found at the regional scale, it means that they must have something in common. That is not a coincidence. They need to share. They share the same type of capabilities in order to develop and grow. That's why they become specialized in particular regional settings. So that is the idea behind it. So the relatedness is minimum between the conditional probability of having a comparative advantage in activity I given comparative advantage in activity J, and vice versa, right? So, and then you can make a nice network. I didn't show them here, but we obtained then a nice measure of the degree of relatedness between all 36 technologies that we distinguished, and between all 65 different industries. And we use that information. But of course, that is just by looking at the degree of relatedness between activities, but then you have to regionalize it in order to show that regions will diversify into activities that are close to their existing activities, right? Because that's what we are interested in. So we use this relatedness density measure again. It's not a new measure. It has been used many times before. And that measures how close a potential new activity I is from a current set of activities J, in which the region C is already specialized, right? So, so this can have a maximum value of 1 when the region has comparative advantage in all activities J that are related to activity I. So there are many relevant capabilities present in the region. So this new activity I will more likely to enter that region. Well, the minimum value of relatedness density is 0 when a region C has no comparative advantage in none of the activities J's that are related to activities I. So basically, that if that region wants to develop this activity I, it has to start from scratch, right? There are no relevant capabilities whatsoever present in the region, and therefore, and that is shown by this minimum value of 0. Okay, then. And this is the most important measure that we developed in this paper, is how to measure the closeness of regions to complex activities. So, so we need to quantify the relationship between relatedness density and complexity, because it is useful in assessing the potential development of opportunities and constraints each region face when diversifying, right? So, what we want to show by using this Pearson correlation coefficient between complexity and related activities J in region I is that are the activities, are the technologies, are the industries in which the region is not yet specialized, so that is the RCA lower than 1, right? So for all technologies and all industries that have an RCA lower than 1, so in which the region is not yet specialized, so that is a potential entry for a region. To what extent do those potential entries have a high degree of relatedness with existing activities and regions that would make the region more complex? So if the correlation is positive in this Pearson correlation coefficient, it means that the diversification opportunities are close to complex activities. So the region has a high degree of relatedness to especially more complex technologies and more complex industries that might enter the region. Well, if there's a negative correlation, it means the diversification opportunities are more close to more simple products. The relatedness with more simple activities in that region is more likely. And when there's no Pearson correlation, it means that the region is neither close to simple nor complex activities. So what we are interested in by looking at this Pearson correlation is what is the opportunity space for regions to diversify? Are they more likely to enter into more complex activities or more likely to move into more simple activities, just because the degree of relatedness is high for more complex activities, or the degree of relatedness is low is high for more simple activities. Okay. Then we go a bit to the descriptives. And then it's always useful to use maps. And this is the map in which I showed the average complexity of the 3 most related technologies in which a region is not yet specialized. So it is an RCA lower than 1, right? So this is the average complexity of the most related technologies. So the top 3 most related technologies that are not yet developed in the region. So these are the activities that are most likely to enter the region as new specializations because they are most related to existing activities in the region, right? So we take the average complexity of those 3 most related technologies. The blue colors, the regions that show a blue color, they show that the average complexity of those 3 most related technologies is low. Well, the red colored regions show that they have potential to move into high complex technologies. So the 3 most related technologies concern highly complex technologies. And this could be, and those are the technologies that we expect that are more likely to enter. So here you can already see some huge differences in Europe. If you look at the red ones, the ones that show good opportunities to develop complex technologies, those are the regions in South Sweden, the south of Germany, the southeast of France, the southeast of the UK, right? So those are also the bit more prosperous regions that have good capabilities to move into more complex related technologies. Well, regions in Spain, Italy, in Spain, with the exception of Madrid and Catalonia, Barcelona area, but especially Italy, Norway, with the exception of Oslo, but Northwest Germany and Eastern Europe, they show low potentials to diversify in new technologies. They show high potentials to diversify in technologies that are more simple, right? So each region has a potential to diversify, and here we just showed the most likely technologies to enter, and to what extent, what is the level of complexity that might bring to that region. Huge differences across Europe. The same exercise for industries, right? So what are the diversification opportunities of regions in Europe in terms of new industries? Again, for the 3 most related industries, very different map than for technologies. So it also matters what type of data you use, right? So that's why it was good to work with 2 different data sets, because the geography of technology is different from the geography of industries. And that is what we expected. So this is a very different map. So for example, the red colored regions are the ones, again, close to more complex activities, right? Well, the blue ones are more close to the least complex industries. And many regions in the Netherlands and also in the UK seem to have potential to develop more complex industries, as well as some regions in Germany and some capital regions in Europe like Madrid, Paris, Oslo, Helsinki. They seem to score high on that. But the rest of Europe has diversification opportunities merely in low complex industries, right? So, okay, you can zoom in every region you want. So it's very informative, but maybe we can talk about it in the discussion. Okay. I skipped this one just for the sake of time. It was just another illustration of what I said before, so does not really matter. Okay, let's look to a main result of the paper. Again, now we show on the y-axis dispersion correlation. You remember, if it has a positive correlation, it means those regions are close to more complex activities. Well, it has a negative correlation. Low scores in this case, a negative correlation is more close to more simple activities, right? Either technologies or industries. Here I show it for technologies. And as you see a nice S-curve, right? On the y-axis, it's the complexity of technologies in the region, right? So it's the average complexity of technologies in the region, in which the region is already specialized. Okay. So what you can actually see is that there is some kind of gravitation effect going to up and to and going down, right? So there are many regions that are close to very simple activities, and those are the ones that have a low overall complexity in the region. And there are many regions on the top that are very close to very complex technologies. So those are the diversification opportunities those regions have. So apparently those on the right top are the regions that are very close to potential entries in more complex technologies, and therefore more likely to diversify in more complex technologies. Well, the ones on the bottom left are the regions that are kind of stuck in a low complexity trap. They have the highest potential in low complex technologies because those potential entries are in more low complex technologies because they have the highest degree of relatedness with existing technologies in those regions. Well, if you then look at the map, it's always nice to have a map. You can actually see this Pearson correlation. It's positive when it is red colored, it's negative when it is blue colored. So here you can see also for region, what is the average, what is the relationship between the complexity of technologies and the average closeness, right? So if you look at the red regions, they are in Stockholm or in Helsinki again, or Oslo, in the southeast of England, the Paris region, the south of France, Madrid, some regions in Germany. They tend to be very close to more complex technologies, while the blue regions tend to be close to the very simple activities, right? So Italy again, some parts of Eastern Europe. You can also see a lot of gray regions. Those are regions in which they have no sufficient patenting activity going on, right? So we left them out of the analysis, as I explained before. Okay, again, you can say a lot on these maps. Here we have the same figure for all industries, right? Not for technology this time, for industry. You see similar kind of S-curve, although the S-curve is a bit less, it's more almost a kind of linear relationship. But again, what it shows is that regions with low complex activities, they have diversification opportunities in more simple industries, while regions with high complexity levels, they tend to have more potential to diversify in more complex industries. And here again, you see the map. Okay, I don't say too much on that, but maybe you can also go into that when we discuss it. Okay, last part of the presentation is about the actual entries, because so far I talked about the potential entries, in which technologies and which industries regions are not yet specialized and which are more likely to enter. Is that in more complex or in more simple activities? Now we go to actual entries and we look at the average complexity of newly entered activities by regions grouped per GDP per capita, their complexity level, population density, and also made a distinction between the AU, the old member states, and the AU 15, the new member states. So the groups were the group of regions were just split in 3 equally sized groups. So so you see 4 panels on the top, those are for technologies, and the bottom panel is for industries. Okay, and for example, left top you see GDP per capita, low, medium, high. You can see the actual entries and what is the average complexities of those new entries. As you can see, there's a high positive correlation with GDP per capita. So the regions with a high GDP per capita enter more complex technologies as compared to regions that have a low GDP per capita. The same with the technology complexity. The region with a high technology complexity enter new technologies that are more complex as compared to low complex regions. Same with population density. Also, the old member states, the EU15, are more likely to enter. They enter actually more complex technologies, and the same is for industries, right? You see the same. You see the same. It's very robust. Okay. Conclusions. So what we did, I forgot, now I remember, I forgot to introduce my co-authors. Okay, I will go back to that at the end. So this is quite unusual, but I will introduce them. I don't know why I forgot about that. Okay, so what we did, study on potential and actual entries in new and complex technologies in industries and regions in Europe. We looked at potential entries. What we found is that low-income regions tend to be close to more simple technologies and industries. High-income regions tend to be close to more complex technologies and industries. When looking at actual entries, we could see that core regions with a high GDP, a high complexity, and high population density are more capable of entering more high complex activities, while lacking regions rely more on low complex activities when diversifying. And this is quite essential because we are talking about future opportunities, diversification opportunities of regions, where we expect which regions will diversify and whether they will diversify in more complex or less complex activities. And there's a very systematic pattern that we can observe, which leads to the conclusion in terms of connecting it to the topic of regional inequality, is that income disparities across regions in Europe are more likely to be reinforced and not reduced due to diversification processes. And this has huge policy implications, right? So as I said in my introduction, the geography of innovation already said that it is more likely to contribute to widening regional disparity. And by looking at the nature of the diversification process that took place in the past, but what we also expect to happen in the near future, we come to the same conclusion. By building on the relatedness framework, adding complexity of activities, and we have quite strong and robust evidence that point in the same direction. Okay, thank you for your attention, and now I'll go back to my first slide, of course, because I made a big mistake. So otherwise, my co-authors will kill me for the right reasons. This is a joint paper, and it's a joint paper with Flavio Pinheiro. He's a fine colleague of mine. He's a physicist working at the University of Lisbon in Portugal. Pierre-Alexandre Ballan is a fine colleague of mine at Utrecht University, and Dominique Hartmann, who is working in Brazil, right, at the University of Santa Catarina. I heard that it's a very nice island, so I also have to visit that one when I come to Brazil. Okay, I think I'll leave it to that, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Ron, for this exciting presentation. And I was thinking about if I could start my sabbatical now, because I completely in love with the possibilities of research. And I was thinking about a big project that our state starts last year, if I'm not wrong. But it's a big project to develop 8 different regions. And I was thinking about an analysis like this, how this analysis like this could help the policymakers to better manage the program and to better manage this kind of organizations and the development of these regions, especially in Brazil. It's completely different, but I was thinking a lot of things is in my in my head now. So
we are doing that currently, yeah, for the Sao Paulo region.
Oh, so maybe we could think about to expand this for our region too in the future. So for our audience, if you want, you can just open your microphone and ask or comment if you have some comments for Rom or some question. And if you are a little bit shy, you can write your question or comment in the chat box, and we can share with Rom. And also, Kezia will leave a questionnaire in our chat. We kindly ask everyone to respond. It's very important to EcoHubi. So, Kezia, please, could you put the link in the chat for us? And
sure.
Thank you. And up to you now. Do you have some questions for Rom? Some comments? So please, Emílio, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, Professor Boschma. It's a great pleasure to meet you. My name is Emílio. I'm a PhD student here at Unicinos. And first of all, I want to congratulate you for your brilliant presentation. It's a great pleasure to learn from you. And I have one question. You talked us about the weak capabilities of regions to diversify, and you told about capabilities and skills and other reasons for this. And I was thinking how this issue is related, for instance, to regional dynamic capabilities, and if it's the case, how can we improve these dynamic capabilities? Thank you, Professor. It's a great pleasure to learn from you.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, Emílio. That's it's a very spot on. Yes. So what? Okay. So I looked at potential entries and actual entries, right? So I do not know why those actual entries happened, but I just looked at whether they have relevant capabilities to do so, and that seems to be a driver. Okay. That's the only evidence that is provided. For potential entries, of course, it might be the case that you might have the right type of capabilities present in the region, but the region is still not capable of moving into it, right? And make it diversify into those potential activities in practice. So this is very important. So, and then dynamic capabilities might come into the picture, right? So some regions have strong dynamic capabilities. There are agents that can take on and move the region and exploit the potentials that they have, or they might remove bottlenecks that prevent the region to diversify into those activities they have a high potential in. So having a high potential does not necessarily mean that you will diversify into it, although you're more likely to do so. In practice, there might still be barriers to overcome, which you have to remove by looking at those dynamic capabilities or policy intervention more in general. So there's a lot to say on that, which I think also is needed, those insights, before you can fully develop a policy program that can actually tackle those bottlenecks that you might observe in additional analysis, right? So it's not good enough to present these results, but you also have to go more into detail and to say, okay, there is potential. That does not necessarily mean that you can just sit down and let it happen. No, you need active intervention by companies, by public policy, by all other kinds of stakeholders that might make a difference in why some regions are capable of exploiting those potentials that they have and why other regions are not capable of doing that. This still does not take away the main message that I presented, right? Is that some regions have capabilities in more simple technologies and some regions have more capabilities in more complex technologies. So I would even dare to say that even if you have strong dynamic capabilities, if you have low potential in low complex activity, so high potential in low complex activities, it would still mean that you're more likely to diversify in those low complex activities, right? So, but there also you might need dynamic capabilities in order to make that happen, right? And for low income regions, it might already be very useful to move into low complex activities because it will generate new jobs, new employment, etc. So economically speaking, it might bring benefit to the region. But at some point of time, what we showed is that at some point in time, you can become trapped into a low complex activities, and you might want to move up the economic ladder and move into more complex activities. And I think in that state of development, there you need very active policy intervention in order to make that happen. That means you have to upgrade your educational system, your research infrastructure, etc., to make that happen, right? I hope I answered a bit your question.
Perfect, Professor. Thank you for your explanation. And I was thinking that indeed I really appreciate the example that you brought us related to the Detroit versus Silicon Valley. And I think it's just a personal proposition, but I think that these regional dynamic capabilities should be more important in developed countries like Brazil. For instance, here you mentioned recently the region of Florianopolis, and we can see that the public administration, the public policies of this region could strengthen the regional dynamic capabilities of this region. And so we can perceive that this region have not more potential, but indeed are developing more than other regions of Brazil. So I really think that this could be an interesting topic to further develop. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, I agree. Very good.
Thank you, Emílio. Professor Ron, thank you. Professor Janaína, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Boschma. It's a pleasure stay here and can hear your presentation. I was thinking about this question of Emílio, and I was thinking about your answer. And I know that's not was not the goal of the paper, but when you talk about complexity, of course I know that's an indicator for this specific factor, but to develop complexity in a region, in a city, in an ecosystem, it's necessary a group of actors. We are thinking about industry, we can think about technologies, but we have probably it's necessary to have an science and technology infrastructure like universities, interactions between these actors, labs, maybe labs that develop high-tech high technologies. I'd like to hear from you about this relation. Of course, it's not the goal of the paper to connect this the level of complexity with the a level of science and technology infrastructure, but I think that there is a strong relation. And maybe when I was looking to the maps, I was thinking about this, maybe that regions that have high level of complexity and a high level of diversity that have capabilities to diversify the economic activities, probably they have a base, they have this infrastructure that helps. And I'm thinking in these factors, because here in Brazil we have now a very difficult situation about investment in science and technology. We have now here in 2021 a level of investment in science and technology that is lower than 2009. So thinking what Kadígia said about apply some studies here in our regions, in our cities, we have to think about this scenario. And I'd like to hear a little bit from you and about these factors, other factors that influence in the complexity, and also what we have to look, what we have to pay attention more when we are thinking about apply some study like that to peripheral regions like Brazil, for example, not like São Paulo, it's peripheral, but it's a rich region of Brazil, but in other regions like here, Rio Grande do Sul, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I think that, two questions. So it's about the science and technology policy, right? So and it depends a bit. I mean, of course, the leading regions. Okay, I said okay, they have a much easier job because they can diversify more complex activities, right? So because their capabilities allow them to do so. That does not necessarily mean that they need a very strong science and technology policy, because they also compete worldwide on the scale. Imply that they need strong intervention because they need to be on the technological frontier or even go beyond that, and they cannot do that alone. So in that sense, I think there's also a need for strong technology and science policy for those regions that are just in between, right? There were not that many regions in my case, but there are some that are neither close to simple nor to complex technologies. So they are kind of stuck, right? So if you would apply that at the country level, you would probably come to the middle income trap. Countries, right? So and Brazil has been often mentioned, right, as one of those that cannot make that jump because this science and technology policy might not be sufficient yet in order to make that happen. Well, countries like Korea and Taiwan, they have managed to do so. right? So and those are good examples, I think, from that are quite relevant in this case. Yeah, your other questions about the peripheral regions in Brazil. Yes, of course, these are, I mean, okay, you have a huge range of peripheral regions in Europe, right? So in Norway, we always have the discussion, right? They always say, okay, we also have peripheral regions, but they're super rich, right? So, well, it's very different from a peripheral region in Bulgaria, where you really have very low income and hardly any economic opportunities, and people are really, let's say, not having a good life and don't have any opportunities whatsoever. So this peripheral region it consists of a wide range of regions. I think the capability approach that I embrace can give you specific information on each specific region, right? The ones, the Ile-de-France and Silesia, right, that I showed. You can also do that for all peripheral regions and see where they still have opportunities that could be exploited. I'm absolutely sure that each peripheral region has a capacity to do so. But you really have to see which are those and what type of policy might be needed in order to activate that. That is, I think, it's the big question, and this is what we are working on in Europe when applying and developing smart specialization policy.
Thank you very much.
Professor Paulo, please, up to you.
Thank you, Kadígia. Thank you, Ron. It was a very exciting talk, and it made me think on something, as everybody is asking about Brazil, because here we are, and so we are interested on how to cope these very interesting insights you have with our reality. As a matter of fact, this is our major concern. And I have a very simple question. What about time to get a trajectory towards complexity and diversity?
Yeah, to look at more at the long-term evolution of those regions, right? So, well, I mean, it's a very good question, because what we can often observe is that, of course, if you take a very short period, you can see there's not much radical change going on, right? So because there's this past dependency that you have to deal with, and of course, the shorter the time frame you take, the more you can actually observe that. What is interesting, and this I think is still rather unexplored, and that's why I think it's a very good question, is how regions can really move out of existing specialization and move into new specializations by taking small steps, right? Which is possible, right? If you take the product space or the industry space or technology space, and you frame that as a network, you can make all small steps. You can even what has been referred to. You can first be specialized in bananas, and you can end up being specialized in computers by making very small steps. So in the short term, you would never observe that, but in the longer term, you might observe that, right? So and then it becomes a very interesting question. How did a country move from bananas to computers, if we take a very long-term perspective? To me, it could mean that it could be through small steps, through this network, right? So you each time you diversify in a related direction, and you can still move from bananas to computers. You can go through that network. In theory, you can. But in practice, is that the case? So I think it would be very interesting to move into in those very long-term analysis and see to what extent those trajectories are followed by region. Of course, we always have a data issue, right? So we don't have too long-term time series. With pattern data, we can do it. With industry data, it's impossible. Right, so but indeed, it could be very interesting, and it would reveal a lot of things, because these are structural change is about long-term economic development, right? So they don't happen overnight. In that sense, yes, I think it would be very good. There are case studies, right, describing the long-term evolution of a particular region. Boston is one of them. Ed Glaser has written a paper on that, but I can recall other case studies. But I would also like to see whether we can observe general patterns in that respect, taking this very long-term perspective. So it's a point very well taken.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ron. We have 3 questions in the chat, so I will read the questions, and after, according your time, you could choose how to answer this. So the first one is, in your opinion, what is the main point to develop regions in this perspective of innovation, especially in high-tech industries? So the main point. The second one from Bibiana is about do you think that virtual spaces for sharing and creating knowledge, maybe virtual proximity, have the potential to help countries like Brazil with low technological complexities and little diversification? And the third one is from Paola, that is in the same direction of Bibiana's question, is about the dark side of the geography of innovation is especially dark for developing countries. In developing countries, we have low complex activities and industries. How can they diversify to more complex industries or technologies, or will we live in the middle income trap forever? So
that would be I don't hope that will happen. No, I think okay. So sorry, but I have 3 minutes left, so I need to be. I promised to be at the other event. Yes, so the middle income, I already talked a bit about that, right? I think it will be a kind of alternative explanation why a middle income trap is there, is that if we look, you can get stuck in low complexity activities, and then in order to move out, it's very difficult if you can only do that in an unrelated diversification process, right? So what we are looking at, if you can still increase your complexity by making it a bit more easy when you diversify. So my example of going from bananas to computer means you go from a very simple product to a very complex product. But if you can succeed by just making small steps, it would already be something, right? So and then you could grow out of this middle income trap. That's always the thing with 3 questions. Shit, what was the last one? Sorry, could you please repeat them just quick?
Yes, it's about the virtual spaces for sharing and creating knowledge, maybe.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I mean, that's and I have no answer whatsoever. I don't know. I mean, what comes closest to what we have done now is these interregional linkages, right? So it means you can move out of your own region. Virtual space also provides that opportunity. But as we know, also virtual space does not take away the type of behaviors that we have, right? Algorithms will show us, will bring us and connect us to people that are very similar to us, right? So that is how these algorithms work. But I think it's an interesting research question that is still very much open, right? So if we indeed depend much more on virtual space, can we indeed make bigger steps forward in that respect? Because it would be much more easy. But it's about access to information. But what I try to emphasize is also the ability to process information, and that will not change that much because, well, I'm old, I'm stuck, right? I'm completely locked in my own thinking, and it will be hard for me to learn radical new things. And that applies to almost everybody. But of course, the more young you are, the more flexible and the more open you are still. I think in virtual space that this type of past dependency would still pop up. That is what I expect, but I don't know too much about it. And I think it's a really exciting research topic for the near future. So we really should exploit that. Absolutely. It's a very important question.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, our audience, for the questions, for the interaction, but we apologize. But especially for the questions that will be answered today. But as Ron has another appointment and we should finish in 2 minutes. So maybe sad but true, I know. But it was an amazing moment, Ron. It was a great pleasure for us to welcome you here today and talking about this important topic. We hope that we will be able to count on your physical presence in the close future. And our community thanks you a lot for this opportunity.
Yeah, I thank you for giving me the opportunity, right? So I'm really sorry about this. Otherwise, we could go on because it is always nice to have this type of discussion. So and I could learn a lot from that. But it's the way it is sometimes.
Maybe we could have a second round in the next month, maybe.
Oh yeah, of course, I'm available.
Let's think about it, Paola, Kezia.
Yes.
So of course, it will be a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for the invitation. It was really nice. I really enjoyed it very much. That's very good.
So thank you, Ron. Thank you, Paulo. Thank you, Mart, Jana, Bruno, Douglas, and all of our students that are here with us this morning. So bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a nice day.
For you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.